A handful of orphans in the Soviet time had the opportunity to enter universities, and after completing their higher education, the state provided them with guaranteed housing, employment, and social benefits. The current status of orphanages has deteriorated since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The economic crisis of the 90s and now the global crisis have depleted the state budget and impoverished Ukrainian orphanages. Overcrowded with unsafe, rundown infrastructure, unqualified personnel, and outdated pedagogy and upbringing methods, orphanages foster a destructive environment for the optimal psychological, physical, and emotional child development. Now I will move into the impoverished quality of education in orphanages and its implications. Research about life in orphanages, as well as my own communication with orphans, reveal that getting into an orphanage is the beginning of a vicious circle. The children used to be diagnosed as imbecile or oligophrenic, which are the Soviet terms for mentally retarded. But currently, the labels of dumb and uneducable still haunt them when they're shuffled around multiple orphanages. Inadequate orphanage education stunts orphans' socialization and doesn't equip them with necessary skills and academic preparation to pursue higher education and employment. Truncated curricula, low teacher expectations, social stereotypes that these children are hopelessly doomed to fail, cruel attitudes of the staff do not help these children to escape the vicious circle. Leaving their orphanage at 18, these children are not prepared for adult life. Research shows as well that orphans deprived of family care lack role models and familiarity with law, and thus they face challenges building a family, finding a job, and obeying the law. Moreover, orphanage conditions foster dependency attitudes, which, as some scholars argue, disadvantage orphans in integrating into society and perpetuating their inferior social status. Orphans become so dependent on state services, such as chores done by the staff in an orphanage, free of charge education, sometimes in 2 majors, monetary benefits and housing, that they are really not motivated to pursue opportunities to be self-sufficient. This argument can seem very controversial, although each situation must be examined on a case-by-case basis. Furthermore, most orphans develop an orphanage complex. They set low expectations for themselves and live in fear of being robbed, beaten up, or murdered one day. The personnel working with the children maintain that 90% of orphans have grim future prospects, confirming the social stereotypes and expectations embedded in the institutional and societal cultures. The social class of unwanted children reproduces vicious cycles of crime and poverty. As the studies have shown, orphans do not know how to organize their daily schedules and tend to engage in substance abuse and crime. Although the findings of one study are not generalizable and self-reported data should be questioned, the results are nevertheless telling. 63% of orphans smoke, 43% consume alcohol on a regular basis, 10% admitted that they have tried soft narcotics, and only 23% claim that they don't have bad habits. Again, this is the data from one study on one of the Moscow orphanages. Predisposition to deviant behavior is also compounded by orphans' lack of family planning knowledge. Female orphans unconsciously often follow their unidentified mother's footsteps. Abandoning their own babies, they perpetuate social orphans and this orphans' plight. After they age out from orphanages at 18, orphans are tracked into vocational schools. My encounter with female orphans was a real awakening for me. The girls were aspiring to become chefs upon graduating from an orphanage. Yet, when the time came to be assigned to different tracks, the principal came up to them and he said that you will be assigned to a tractor driving track, saying, "One day your dream may come true." These young ladies never pursued their desired profession and had to find a job at a factory after completing their vocational training in tractor driving. Unfortunately, their job opportunities are limited by the availability of housing, which they can afford only when working in a factory that provides inexpensive dormitory rooms. Overall, upon exiting their orphanages as volinettes, the Ukrainian scholar contends, 61% of orphans continue their education in vocational schools, 11% in universities, and the rest attempt to find jobs. Furthermore, she argues that most of the children dream about jobs requiring higher education degrees, such as jobs like artists, doctors, lawyers, interpreters, for which these children are not prepared academically. Once they are tracked into vocational school, orphans continue to face daunting life challenges. Beyond lacking social skills, orphans suffer from a quality of vocational education in Ukraine that leaves much to be desired. As the Ukrainian Human Development Report stated, vocational education has suffered tremendously since independence. Many vocational schools have never upgraded their curriculum to fit a market-based economy or have been closed down since the collapse of the Soviet Union. The upward mobility pressure to receive higher degrees in a knowledge economy disadvantages orphans who are pushed into such tracks as tractor driving, carpentry, masonry, or stuffed animal making. The examined case studies and my own communication with female orphans unravel that these children really strive to find a job that will lead to immediate self-sufficiency. They really don't have time to dwell on their life aspirations, picking and choosing their dream job. Unfortunately, these children stop dreaming. As some of them stated, why dream if you don't know if you will be alive tomorrow? And so what is really in store for them after they exit orphanages? And so, from the moment orphans end up in an orphanage, they are confronted with insurmountable difficulties and are forced to mature at an accelerated pace. How does the Ukrainian government help them transition into their adult life? Examining Ukrainian policies and legislation, one might reasonably conclude that orphans are not neglected by the state. Article 52 of the Ukrainian Constitution states that the government is responsible for taking care of and providing equal rights to orphans and ensuring access to free secondary and higher education until they reach the age of 23. The government provides them with a monthly stipend, which usually exceeds the standard stipend determined by the state by 50%. Also, academically successful orphans are rewarded by an additional stipend. When orphans reach the age of 18, they receive a one-time financial payment in the amount of 795 hryvnias, which is currently, at the current currency exchange, is $106, as well as a yearly stipend for purchasing books, which is 3 times the amount of a regular stipend. Furthermore, students orphans are provided with housing in a dormitory and a single ticket that allows them for a free-of-charge admission into theaters, museums, and public transportation. Moreover, orphans are provided with free daily meals, clothes, bed sheets, and towels. Upon graduating from their vocational school or university, orphans are entitled to guaranteed employment. However, despite all of this, once past vocational schools, if they choose to attend, of course, orphans face obstacles in the job market. Scholars argue that many employers have a tendency to discriminate against orphans. They're reluctant to hire them to avoid additional expenditures on social benefits to which orphans are entitled. Moreover, employers regard these vulnerable adults as insufficiently qualified, physically unfit, emotionally unstable, irresponsible, and non-committed. If orphans are lucky to find a job, their employment opportunities are usually limited to factories that provide inexpensive housing in the dormitories. Otherwise, once they complete their vocational training, streets become their new home.